All right, without further ado, we'll go to the program. And the presenter is Polly Bartow this evening. Polly has a bachelor's degree in history and master's credits toward history. Her professional affiliations are significantly attached to what she's going to be doing tonight. She's a member of the Historical Society of Early American Decorating, called HSEAD. Is there an easy way of saying that, or is it just
HSEAD?
HSEAD. She's a member by juried application, and I think that means she had to present work.
I had to submit 2 pieces that were judged to deem their worthiness.
Okay, and apparently she's worthy because she's member by juried application of the Estes Stevens Brazier Guild. She's a trustee-elect for the National Board of HSEAD. She is a judge in the penwork category at the annual exhibit of Brazier Guild members. She is the national chairman of a Daughters of the American Revolution Committee responsible for overseeing judging the work of thousands of fine artists, fiber artists, authors, and composers annually, as well as preparing the annual exhibition of national winners. She has won numerous awards for her decorative painting, including stenciling. And she's going to talk to us about a lovely old house up on Oak Hill, whose resident owner is here this evening with us. Tell us your name again, I'm sorry.
Claire Powell.
Claire Cowell. So it's Claire's house that we're going to be talking about.
Later on in the program.
Without further ado, Polly, I'm going to turn up the lights. Will you tell me to?
Thank you. Okay, the slides start right away. So I'm going to read my program, which is the best way to assure that I don't ramble on for 2 hours. So hopefully
Can you see?
No, not well.
Which would be better for
That's
the
the better. For her, the light, and for us, darker.
Okay, gosh, that's too bad. I could have brought just a table lamp or something. Okay, oops, and I need the wood clicker thing here. Is that enough?
I don't know, we could try.
Okay, let's try.
I have another one just like that in my fur.
Okay, well, that makes it a lot better for the slides, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, okay. All right. The stencil has been used as an artistic tool for perhaps thousands of years, and its use extends to various arts. Walls, textiles, books, games, furniture, and countless other objects have been, at one time or another, decorated or marked by use of a stencil. The stencil itself is very simply a design cut into an impervious material such as paper, coated linen, or acetate. These are mylar on the picture. Then paint, ink, dye, or metallic powders are forced through the stencil, usually using a brush or a cloth, onto the surface being marked or decorated. Stenciling may be executed as a means of ornamentation, and you could argue that some of that crosses the line into fine art. Or its use may be purely functional. There's Mr. Bartow, one of Phil Smith's stencils. It's impossible to say when the first simple stencil was used. It is an extremely ancient tool, which by its very simplicity may have come into use by many cultures at different times without necessarily being carried from one culture to another. Among the earliest historical evidences of stenciling is found on the island of Fiji in the South Pacific, where for generations women decorated bark cloth with designs stenciled through openings cut in dried banana leaves. This picture was 1949, and they are stenciling through coconut leaves. Oops, oh, I did it too soon. Stenciling was used very early in China, at least as early as the Tang Dynasty, beginning in 618 AD. Stencils there were used in Buddhist monasteries to reproduce sacred texts and to decorate the walls of temples with religious symbols. The Mogao grottos, nicknamed the Caves of 1,000 Buddhas, in the Gansu province, China, were decorated by use of stencils. And there are apparently several rooms with these row upon row upon row of little Buddhas, all applied using a stencil. Japanese artisans had developed the use of stencils to decorate silk textiles at least by the mid-8th century AD.
He's a little upside down.
Well, you know, I don't think I edited my picture there. Okay, look just at the top one, which is also upside down. That's too bad. Let's see. That is a 15th century costume that is stenciled, and that's too bad. You can't really see it because I didn't edit the slide. But those are little swirl patterns that are stenciled all over that silk actor's costume. The Victoria and Albert Museum in England has a fragment of stenciled silk from the 8th century AD, which incorporates Buddhist symbols from Japan. Very early stenciling is found in Europe as well. An interesting educational use was recorded in the 1st century AD by the Roman teacher Quintilian, who used alphabet stencils to teach young boys to properly form their letters. And then the historian Procopius recorded that Charlemagne signed his name with the aid of a stencil. One of the first widespread uses of the stencil was in the production of playing cards. These were made in Germany, Spain, Italy, and France, beginning in the 1400s. This image, or the image outline, was block printed on paper, and then the color was applied through a stencil, and they made wall hangings with a religious theme in this same method. And this is a little poster that the playing card vendor used to advertise his wares, but if you look at it carefully, you can see the little playing cards all up and down his sleeves and up and down his shirt. By the 1400s, stencils were being used in France and England to decorate walls in churches and other buildings, and by the late 1500s, these decorations had become much more elaborate and were used in private homes on both interior and exterior walls. And these are early 15th century French wall stencils. About 1688, stencils began to be used to decorate wallpaper. And I'll explain this slide in just a minute. The earliest wallpaper was handmade in France of single sheets called dominoes, using simple designs and very few colors, pasted end to end to form a repeating pattern. This new mode of wall decoration quickly gained popularity, and by the early 1700s, more refined imported domino paper was being sold in Boston. So this, you have to look at the picture on the bottom first. So this is the street, and here's the domino paper vendor here, and here's another one here. The papers are hung from the eaves there for your inspection. And then here's the factory. This lady is stenciling the design right on the single sheets of paper that you see stacked up. The next one, they're hanging them up to dry. And over here, they're starting to apply the domino paper to the wall, one sheet at a time. And here you can see they're lining them up, and there's the finished wall. So it sounds even more tedious than the kind of wallpapering that we do today. By 1739, wallpaper was being made in the colonies, and by the Revolution was a luxury, all the rage in places such as Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, among the wealthy few who could afford it. This is English stenciled wallpaper from 1750. Well, naturally, folks of more modest means in smaller towns and rural areas wanted to decorate their own homes with the beautiful patterns found in wallpaper panels and borders during the Federal period, and so the itinerant painter rose up to meet this need. These itinerant stencilers traveled by horseback or on foot. Some pushed carts and others carried heavy packs filled with stencils, brushes, pigments, and other tools of the trade. The common practice when hiring a stenciler was for him to first paint a sample of his patterns in an out-of-the-way place such as the inside of a closet or sometimes behind a door. Then the family would look at the patterns and they would choose the ones that they liked the best. The stenciler would often move in with the family while completing the project, and sometimes his only pay was his room and board. Some early stencilers were farmers, and so the stencil work provided employment of a sort during the winter months. We don't know exactly when homes in America began to be decorated with stenciling. However, the earliest documented wall stencilings are in Massachusetts. In 1778, when Abner Goodale went home to Marlborough to recuperate from wounds received in the Revolutionary War, he had 5 rooms in his home stenciled as a gift to his new bride, Molly. The picture on the upper left is the home as it appeared in about 1930, and then there it is today through the trees. Among the motifs that he chose were a very appropriate border of ribbons and wedding bells. This home is still standing, and it is owned by descendants of Abner and Molly. The colors used at the time were vibrant. They were not at all the muted tones that you might associate with stenciling. Antique stenciling that you may have seen has almost certainly faded with time, and also some pigments are more stable than, or more unstable than others, and tend to fade rather quickly. Popular colors included vermilion, green, yellow, and white. The wall colors themselves were often strong shades of pink, yellow, or gray. However, some stenciling was done directly on the plaster. And this slide is the stencil house at the Shelburne Museum in Shelburne, Vermont. Some of the stencil motifs did have symbolic meanings attached to them. The swag and pendant was then known as the Liberty Bell, and it was considered a patriotic symbol. Flower baskets represented friendship. The oak leaf, strength and loyalty. Willows meant everlasting life. And the pineapple, of course, then as now, means hospitality. Hearts meant love and happiness, and they were often included in the decorations for a new bride. Well, 2 of the best documented of the many New England itinerant stencilers who can be identified by name as well as by their distinctive designs are Moses Eaton and his son, Moses Eaton Jr. Eaton Sr. was born June 19, 1753. He served in the American Revolution, and he lived in Needham, Mass, near Boston, until moving to a farm in Hancock, New Hampshire in 1792. By this time, he was about 40 years old, and he certainly seems to have kept busy with his stenciling near his new home. There are a number of homes in the Hancock, Dublin, and Peterborough area with stenciled walls that were done by Eaton. I hope you've all had a chance to drive through Peterborough. It's a charming, charming little town, and I would love to see the inside of some of those houses. Moses Jr. was born in Hancock in 1796 and learned the art of stenciling from his father. Eaton Jr. began traveling the countryside in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine with his stencil kit while he was still a teenager. His known stops in Maine include Alewife, North Saco, Sebec, Sydney, Kennebuck, Falmouth, Waterboro, East Vassalboro, Blue Hill, and temptingly close in Buckfield. I'll be talking about Moses Eaton Jr. for the rest of the program. In his 20s, Eaton met the muralist Rufus Porter, who's familiar to us because I hope you've had the chance to visit the Rufus Porter Museum in Bridgeton. Porter was passing through Eaton's hometown of Hancock. The 2 apparently became friends, and they collaborated on a couple of projects, the Hancock Inn in Hancock and the Joshua Eaton House in Bradford, New Hampshire. When Eaton was 39, he bought a farm in Harrisville, New Hampshire, near his childhood home. He married Rebecca Plant of Dublin, New Hampshire, and they had 3 children. He decorated the parlor of his own home using red and green patterns and motifs in a soft raspberry background. In his later years, he farmed and on occasion continued his stenciling journeys around New England. Eaton died at home, and this is his home, in 1886 at the age of 90. His descendants continued to live in this house until 2002. In 2005, Polly Bartow, who is also a member of HSEAD and a recognized authority on Moses Eaton stencil, restored the parlor walls for the new owners of the Moses Eaton house. And look at the beautiful, beautiful raspberry color of the walls there, and a gorgeous stenciling. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there were a number of itinerant stencilers known by name who worked in New England during this period. Emery Rice was one of many who used stencils that copied from Eaton. Nathaniel Parker's work is known in New England as well. Well, how do you know if you're looking at a Moses Eaton stencil? There are no written records that have been discovered linking various design elements to Moses Eaton. However, his stencil kit has survived. During the years when Janet Waring was researching her groundbreaking work, Early American Stenciling on Walls and Furniture, published in 1937, and there's a copy of that book here on the table if you'd like to look at it afterwards, she became friends with the descendants of Eaton's daughter, Mary. On one of her annual visits to the farm, she was given Eaton's stencil kit as found in the attic of the home. The kit is a wooden box containing 78 stencils that are used to make 40 complete designs. Some designs require more than one stencil. The designs range from a large weeping willow to small hearts, diamonds, and circles used for the center motifs. There were also 8 large worn brushes and a few wood blocks used to stamp designs on fabric. When Waring died, her sister gave the stencil kit to the Society for the Protection of New England Antiquities, now called Historic New England. Waring, as well as other researchers since, positively matched stencils from this kit to stencils found in various homes, thus making it possible to link Eaton to the decoration in those homes. Eaton's stencils were made of heavy brown paper which was stiffened with oil, and here's a sampling of some of the stencils from his kit. Some stencilers painted or even shellacked their stencils. Many of Eaton's patterns were cut with a beveled edge to create a sharper outline, and there's plenty of space around the cutout area to help prevent overrunning the stencil with the brush. Eaton's stencils do not have register marks, which means he simply eyeballed their placement. He just held it up where he thought it should go and let her rip. Polly Bartow describes that his designs are carefree, and she explains that the overall placement of motifs on walls is often eyeballed as well, rather than being laid out with a ruler. It is known that itinerant painters often copied designs from one another, but each would have cut his own stencils. No 2 people will cut a design the same way. In fact, any one person will cut the design slightly differently each time she does it. And so it's possible to match a stencil with the image produced by it and thus determine who probably executed the design, or at least whose stencils were being used. Eaton did have designs that seemed to be unique to him and his followers, and some that are typically used only in Maine. There are 2 distinct genres of early American stenciling, classical and folk art. Classical, as you see here, also called border style, is characterized by graceful and elegant swags and festoons outlining the tops of walls, along with complementing border designs that come down the walls and run along baseboards and chair rails. During the Federal period, there was renewed interest in classical design and all things Greek and Roman, sparked by the mid-18th century discovery of the ruins in Pompeii and Herculaneum. Classical style stencil motifs are very reflective of this neoclassical influence in Federal period decoration. The second style is folk art, characterized by an all-over design of motifs often borrowed from nature. Leaves, flowers, flower baskets, trees, birds, vines, and other motifs are common. The designs are often primitive and naive, but infinitely appealing. Moses Eaton's stencil designs are among the best known of the folk art style. Motifs typical of Eaton include the weeping willow, both with and without a bird, the pineapple, the flower basket, also with or without a bird, oak leaves, maple leaves, roses, sunflowers, and vines. Various geometrics make up borders and basic elements to which a variety of central elements, such as hearts or simple circles, could be added. A sampling of Eaton's work includes, first of all, this wall from the Mansell Alcock House, located just 1 mile from Moses Eaton's own home in Hancock, New Hampshire. So notice at the top the patriotic swag and pendant, the Liberty Bell design. And then you can see flower spray. Take a good look at this flower spray. That's important for us here in Otisfield. And this border, similar. Oak leaf spray at the top, a running border of oak leaves just below the swag and festoon, flowers and leaves here at the bottom. Beautifully, beautifully executed design. Let's see. Next is this wall fragment on plaster. It's from the Smithsonian American Art Collection. Note the beautiful sunflower motifs, red sunflowers in this case, and other very typical botanical elements. And note this border. Okay. Here's a maple leaf with a little wreath around, but just make careful note of that border. Next is another wall fragment. Take a look at the pineapple. Typical Moses Eaton pineapple, although this is not the one usually seen in Maine. This wall fragment is part of Historic New England's collection. The pineapple typically seen in Maine has a double leaf at the top, and the leaves are rounded, and there's a little sort of spray right in the middle, and the whole thing is bracketed by one long leaf. Again, you see the oak leaf cluster, the same border that you saw on the other slide. And one more fragment, also owned by Historic New England. Again, the same botanical elements that you've seen in the other. Just a little hint of some of the border design at the top. So this brings us back to the question, how do you know if you're looking at stenciling executed by Moses Eaton? Well, there is a house in Otisfield with lovely original stenciling that has been attributed to Moses Eaton Jr., so we'll use it as a case study and see what we think. The house is the old Holden Homestead located on Oak Hill Road. The older part of the house is the cape portion with the center chimney, completed in 1812 by Roland Holden. The addition was put on in 1825. In his book, Oxford County, Maine, A Guide to Historic Architecture, author Randall Bennett states, quote, "This well-preserved farmstead is particularly notable for its authentic early 19th century exterior qualities and for its interior wall stenciling attributed to Moses Eaton, an itinerant New Hampshire stenciler who probably executed them in the late 1820s or early 1830s. So, our first piece of evidence is that Eaton is attributed with painting the stencils in a book authored by a well-known Maine historian. No mention is made in the book of who made the attribution, so I called the author and asked. Randy explained that he never went in the house himself, but relied on information gathered by a volunteer who was told the Moses Eaton story by the homeowner. Randy is not aware of an expert ever having inspected the stenciling to authenticate the Eaton attribution, so there's really not much to go on there. My next step was to examine photographs taken of the stenciling by Otisfield Historical Society members as part of an architectural survey conducted in the town some years ago. The stenciling certainly has characteristics of Eaton's work, using known Eaton motifs in the typical all-over folk art design. Seen are the pineapple, the weeping willow, the flower basket, flower spray, and borders, all similar to Eaton's. The stencils photographed well, and the painting appears to be well done. Very encouraging. As I studied the photos, however, one motif stood out: a pair of leaping stags positioned over a doorway. I couldn't recall seeing the stag in lists of designs used by Eaton, so I turned to my library of books on the subject, in particular, expert Polly Bartow's catalog of Eaton designs and Janet Waring's 1937 book on wall stenciling, and the stag is not there. Knowing that my knowledge of Eaton's work is incomplete, I contacted the real expert, Ms. Forcier, and sent her the photo of the stag wall. She confirmed that the stag is a mystery, and in her words, wonderfully curious. She also commented that the frieze, which would be the border along the top, the frieze seen on the stag wall has echoes of Eaton's work, but it is not a replica of any known Eaton frieze. So, it seemed that this puzzle was becoming a little more complicated. I decided it was time to see the stencils for myself. On a very pleasant evening not long ago, I paid a visit to the present owners of the Holden House, Sean and Claire Powell, and here Claire sits. So if I say anything amiss, Claire, you speak right up and correct me. They graciously answered my questions. Their phone number is not in the book, so I just showed up unannounced one day. They graciously answered my questions and invited me to see the stencils. 3 areas downstairs have stencil decorations visible. The Powells were told that a 4th room is stenciled as well, but that area is wallpapered and they've been uneasy about removing that wallpaper themselves. All stenciling is in the older Cape style portion of the home. I saw the central hall first. It has a pattern of pineapples alternating with floral sprays executed in panels separated by geometric borders. Now, does this border look familiar?
Yes.
Yes, you've seen it before. How about this floral spray?
Yeah.
Yep, you've seen that one before. How about the pineapple? You've seen a pineapple before. Is it that pineapple?
Is it 2 colors? Is it 2 colors? Does that show?
Yeah,
Or is
they're
there
done in
anything
2
else that I can
colors.
see?
The stenciling is done in red and green on a yellow ground. Yellow being a very common wall color for the period. Next, we moved into the front room to the right of the hall. This room was painted a soft gray, and the motifs used include the pineapple, weeping willow, with 2 styles of bird, flower basket, vertical borders to separate the panels, and a lovely frieze. The stencil colors are red, green, and yellow. Finally, we moved to a small room behind the front room, and there were the 2 stags over the door. The room is painted pink, and the stencils include 2 styles of floral sprays, vertical border, trees beside the stags, and a frieze. Colors used are red and yellow. The plaster walls themselves in each room are in fine condition, and the original wall paint as well as the stencil decorations are in very good condition, exhibiting only expected wear for their age. I examined them closely, and the stencils in all 3 rooms are definitely original to the period. Encouraging. The Powells explained the ownership history of the home and the story of the stencils as told to them by Dot Mayberry, one of the former owners. The present owners have lived there for 10 years. They purchased the home from the Johnston family, who told them they owned the place for 20 years. The Johnstons purchased from Dot Mayberry, who inherited the home from her father. He bought the farm from Holden descendants. Dot Mayberry understood from family tradition that the stencils were done by Moses Eaton. I talked with one of Dot's stepdaughters, who told me that Dot is still living but in poor health, and I've not been able to talk with her. So still no definitive authentication, but a wonderful family story, and family stories very often have a grain of truth in there somewhere, and I'll come back to this. Intrigued, I was still faced with the mystery of the stags. I decided to put motifs from the Holden House side by side with known Eaton stencils to see how they compare. First up is the pineapple. In all of these slides, the Holden House motif is on the left, and the known Eaton design is on the right. So you can see the from the hallway in the Holden house, and there's the known Eaton stencil. Do you see a difference?
Yes.
Yes, there's a marked difference, and that would be in the leaves on the top. Okay. There are no known Eaton designs with the leaves done this way. Okay, a little different on the bottom here as well. These little leaves, I suppose, are shorter on the Holden house. Okay, interesting. Let's see. Next is the flower basket seen in the front parlor room. Right away, we see that the handles are missing in the Holden house, but otherwise, it seems to me to be very much the same stencil. I couldn't see any other marked difference. But you would think, if it were just wear, you would think that there would be wear here too, because this red paint is beautiful. It's all intact. So why would the red paint on either side all of a sudden disappear along with the green dot? So I think it's a different stencil. Similar, but different. In the same room are several weeping willows with a bird, which is a very common Eaton motif, but here the differences with known Eaton work is more striking. Eaton is not known to have placed his birds superimposed on the tree, the way we see in the Holden house. Eaton's birds were always perched on the top of the tree. To my eye, the weeping willow is exactly the same, but it's obviously a different bird, and it's obviously in a different placement. There are two styles of bird in a willow tree in the Holden house, and both are executed with the bird superimposed in the middle of the tree. The border in the stag room is more promising. To me, it looks identical to the stencil in Eaton's kit. He apparently found this border design very useful, as it appears frequently in homes known to have been decorated by him. Likewise, the frieze in the front parlor seems identical. I couldn't see any differences there. Unfortunately, I do not have a color picture of the known Eaton work on the bottom. And the vertical border used in the hallway, to me, looks identical. The yellow floral motif seen on the stag wall is very, very close, but examine it carefully.
Yes.
Was it done with the same stencil? Yeah, I don't think so.
I can see three, if you look on the, you can tell by, if you count, I count. So see how you get the three right below this top red, I'm gonna call it poppy. And you look below it, you see three, below that you see 1, 2, 3 lines, and you look over there, there's only 2. And actually the middle one is angled bigger,
Yeah.
it's bigger and angles
Yeah.
different.
There are some other differences. The angle of this flower. This flower looks like it's looking up. This one looks like it's looking down. And then here's a big difference. This one has that red flower, and this one has another one of the balls. The plain green ball that you see here and here in the Holden house. It's really, really close. This one is obviously copied from that one, but not copied exactly.
Is it poppies, do you know?
I don't know. Red flower. Yep. Okay, let's see.
The Chinese could have done it better. They're very good at imitating.
And finally we have, oh no, what did I just push? Wrong one. Okay. And finally we have that unique stag design. I can't compare it to any known Eaton because there is no known Eaton. Perhaps Eaton borrowed the stag stencil or cut one just for this house at the request of the owner. That could be. But taken with Polly Forcier's comment about the authenticity of the frieze seen in this same room, and the obvious differences in some of the stencil motifs, I think there's room to question whether Eaton truly executed these absolutely stunning designs. But what about the family story, passed down from owner to owner, which attributes the painting to Moses Eaton? Well, perhaps Eaton is the true artist, but maybe there is another explanation. When all things early American was undergoing one of its periodic surges of popularity in the early 20th century, Any old wall stenciling became known as Moses Eaton style, or simply Moses Eaton stenciling. So think of Kleenex. I always call it a Kleenex. More properly, it's a facial tissue, which may or may not have been made by the Kleenex people, but I just call it a Kleenex. Well, they were doing the same thing with Moses Eaton. They said Moses Eaton stenciling, whether or not it was actually done by Moses Eaton. By the early 20th century, Eaton was certainly the most well-known stenciler because he's so well documented. That stencil kit, Janet Waring's work, the work of Nina Fletcher Little and others. But he was by no means the only man doing quality stencil work in New England. There were many, and some of those many did work that was better than Moses Eaton's, finer quality. Polly Forcier offered that as a young man, Erastus Gates learned from Moses Eaton, who was much older than Gates by that time, and Erastus Gates used many of Eaton's designs, cutting his own stencils. Gates' territory overlapped Eaton's, so it's possible that he made his way to Otisfield. There were many others who copied Eaton's designs, and we may never know for sure who decorated the Holden house. What is certain is that these are beautifully painted, beautifully preserved, very fine examples of early 19th century folk art stenciling in the Moses Eaton style. They are most worthy of our attention, and Otisfield is lucky to claim them as part of the history of the town. And I think the Powells are very lucky to be the current custodians of that beautiful, beautiful stenciling. Well, with industrialization beginning in the 1840s, wallpaper soon became mass-produced by machine at prices that were affordable by nearly any homeowner. Wallpaper enjoyed a new surge of popularity, and homeowners eagerly papered over the hand-painted stencils, which suddenly were seen as shabby and unsophisticated. Luckily, not all stenciled walls were papered over, and even if they were, the paints used in early stenciling very often survives the wallpaper treatment, and careful removal of old paper, even now, may reveal the wonderful surprise of original stencils underneath. A new interest in American folk art of the 19th century arose in the 1920s and 30s, and individuals with the means to do so, such as Abby Aldrich Rockefeller, Mrs. John D. Rockefeller Jr., and Nina Fletcher Little, began to amass huge collections of such things as samplers, quilts, and decorative arts, including stenciling. When these private collections were made public, the average person started to become interested in so-called early American decoration. The work of researchers such as Janet Waring and Nina Fletcher Little ensured that early decorative art such as stenciling received the serious attention it deserved. Groups such as the Historical Society of Early American Decorating preserve original pieces and pattern designs and teach traditional decorating techniques in the hope that this knowledge is not lost forever. You can see lovely original stenciled walls in the Stencil House and Dutton House at the Shelburne Museum in Shelburne, Vermont, and also at the Brickstore Museum in Kennebunk, Maine. And if you'd like to take a look, I didn't bring all of my library, but I did bring 3 good books with lots of pictures of Eaton works if you'd like to take a look there. And that is the end. And I'd be happy to take questions. I don't know how to turn this on.
Just push it at the top.
Yeah, okay.
Look it through.
I'm
Yes.
just curious how you got interested in stenciling in the first place. Where was the first time you first did it?
Oh, my goodness.
Just curious, like was it a,
Well, I think the first stenciling I did would have been soon after we were married. Ken's grandmother was a very, very early member of HSEAD. And that's where I've had my first exposure, real exposure to American decorative arts. She was a multi-award winner and many credentials. So that's where I first became interested. There used to be a shop in Falmouth called Mainly Shades, and that's where I took my first lesson. Yeah. So that's where I got started. Yeah.
Are there examples where different stenciling contractors overlap in the same structure?
Yes.
Would that be a possibility?
I think it's very likely that someone who studied with Moses Eaton Jr. did the Holden House. The motifs are so similar that the person who stenciled the Holden House obviously copied some of Eaton's designs. So, and this Erastus Gates may be the one who did them. But it's probably impossible to ever know for sure.
I'm interested in the stacks. I'm interested in the term you're using, why you're calling them the stag. And I'm wondering also if, there must have been other artists who painted stags, other stencilers who painted stags. Or have you looked at that at all?
I haven't. I have not seen any other stag or deer. I've used the term stag because in penwork, I've painted numerous little boxes and so forth with a little stag design, and it's always called a stag.
It's always the same.
It's always called a stag in
Yeah,
pen
it
and
looks
ink.
the same for me.
So that's why I use the term stag. Yeah. Nothing more complicated than that.
Okay.
Well, I'll show you in case there's someone here who doesn't know how it's done. I'll just give you a little quick demo. I'm going to use acrylic paint. They mix their own paint then. The solvent was sometimes sour milk, but I'm using acrylic paint. So
No sour milk here.
no sour milk here. No, they would have a little lump of pigment and mix it with the sour milk. If you ever use these paints, this is the way you mix it. You put your hand over the cap, because those lids can fly open. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay. And I'll use two typical colors, yellow and green.
I love the colors.
I know, they were not afraid of strong color.
No.
Vibrant.
Yeah, the raspberry and that. Oof.
In Moses Eaton's own home, that house, I've heard it described as glowing. When you go in that room, those raspberry walls just glow. It must be absolutely wonderful. So here's a stencil brush. I brought two of them. Nothing too fancy about them. And I use a paper plate. Why waste my good palettes? A little paint goes a long, long, long way. So you would just kiss the edge of your bristles with the paint, rub out the extra. You could use a paper towel for that too. I'm going to use Moses Eaton's technique and eyeball it. So here's a little corner motif. And you want to just pound or pounce the paint on. If you scrub, you're going to push paint underneath the edge of the stencil and you'll have a smeared design. So just pounce, 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 pounce. And you can keep going and keep going. The paint will last a long time. And kind of move your brush around a little bit if you find that you've got a place on the bristles where it's a little heavier than others. I've never painted on a spring back before, so there's just a little start of it.
When he did his stenciling, it didn't look like he did it shaded, it looked like he did it
It's not shaded.
all
No, no, original stenciling is, of that period, is not stenciling, it's solid color. So, well, I didn't mix my paint very well, you can see that there's still a little fluid in there. So here's a stencil with two different elements. Let's see if I can brace that so it doesn't bounce as much. Maybe if I just hold it a little bit there. Okay, so there's, oh, thanks. Oh, that
Does it help?
Yeah, that does help. Okay, and because it's acrylic paint, I can put my other stencil right on top of it right away because it dries. If this were oil paint, you would have to wait. I didn't get much pigment in there. Okay, and I'm just going to eyeball it. That goes over the flower. Okay. In Moses Eaton style, close enough.
I like that. Makes it look not like wallpaper.
Well, you know, to my eye, the stenciling is so much more beautiful than mass-produced wallpaper. So there you go. Yeah. So that's all there is to it. Simple, simple, easy peasy.
I have a question about preservation of these stencils. I mean, I'm thinking of the poor homeowner that has the responsibility, and she's not allowed to put wallpaper on top. She's got to display them forever. And how do you take care of that?
Well,
How do you protect, or do you try to protect?
I'm not going to pretend to be an authority on conservation of stenciling, but there's one thing that I would say never do, and that is don't ever put polyurethane or varnish or anything like that over them. They certainly don't need that to protect them. So if you, does anyone else have stenciling, original or otherwise, in their home? No?
New
Do you
stencil.
have something?
Judy?
But it's not old.
Oh, did you do it?
No, the
Okay.
previous owner.
I have
did.
some that my husband did. He had never done it before. And he just got a book, and it made me very angry how easily he did. And
Well,
just his first attempt, he made his own stencils. He went out and bought some paint and proceeded to paint that, you've seen that
Yes,
mural
yeah.
around the kitchen.
Yeah.
But now the kitchen walls need painting. And
Well, if you
How'd you-
want,
how'd
if you
you
wanted
I
to,
do?
if you wanted to save Dave's stenciling, and if I were you, I certainly would. I think, what color are the walls? Are they
the walls are
gray?
pale green.
Pale green, okay.
And my idea
You
was to
could.
try to draw a sort of a line or imaginary line around the stencils and have the painter do everything except the stencil.
Mhm. I've seen
that correct?
people who try to paint all around those.
No.
stencils.
No.
I've seen that done. I've seen that done on furniture also,
no.
with
No,
bronze designs on it. I don't think you should do that.
no, okay.
You could flick off a little piece of that paint and take it to any paint store and they can color match it for you. And then you could just draw an arbitrary line and bring your paint down there. I think another, maybe a pretty way to do it would be to put some sort of a little divider border over the top of Dave's designs and then paint down to that. So you've got some logical ending
Well,
place.
it's right in the middle of the wall.
Well, still, yeah, still.
Don't frame it that way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yes,
They have frog tape.
yes, yeah. In the case of the Holden house, you know, I think, what are you doing now? You're just
No,
brushing?
nothing.
You're just
I'm
brushing the cobwebs and,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think you should keep on doing
I'm
just
afraid
that.
to do anything to it.
Yeah, I think you could wash it gently with just plain water if you thought that it needed it anymore.
Well, when we painted the woodwork in that bedroom when we first moved in, you could see, I don't know if it was just old smoke and stuff, but I was afraid that it was like washing away whatever was on there, you know. Around the edge, you could see where we washed all the woodwork down, so we just left it and didn't touch it, so.
Yeah, I think you could take just a damp cloth,
And wipe it
you know,
down.
wring it out with just plain water and wipe over if you felt you needed to. I mean, think of it, they wallpapered right over these, you know, so it can take a little
Yeah,
abuse, so to speak. If you've got any Mars or marks, I'd take a pink pearl eraser. That's the brand name, Pink Pearl.
okay.
Take a pink pearl eraser and you could go at it with a pink pearl and it should, pink pearl is a wonderful tool.
One thing that you could try too is, you know, the dry erasers?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're foamy things. We use that in paper conservation and on top of watercolors and things like that. And you just do it very, very lightly. We cleaned, I work for a park service. So
Okay,
in the Adams house in Quincy, Massachusetts, we did the
Okay,
old
yeah.
wallpaper using the dry erase sponges. And it takes, you just do it very gently and you can see that it'll take some of the dirt away. It'll look, and it takes a long time, but you can try it in a small section. And if you don't see any color lifting, then it should be okay. Probably what you're taking away is old soot and
Yeah.
smoke and.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to
Yeah.
know. You know, fortunately, all three rooms, the stenciling is bright. You know, it really is very bright. That fourth room, it would be interesting to just pick back the wallpaper.
Yeah, maybe I may.
Take care of it.
If it's milk paint, one of the things is it's very tough, and really the only thing is a solvent for most milk paint is ammonia. So you don't want to use anything with any kind of chemical ammonia.
And how would you go about removing the wallpaper, with a little moisture or steam?
Well, water, spray
Spray
on
on
the
the
water.
water.
Yeah, I wouldn't use any chemical solvent on it. You know, I've always had the best success with wallpaper with just plain old water.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, warm water in a spray bottle, spray it on, let it sit, spray a little more on, let it sit, and then it softens that glue and you can take it off. And then you wouldn't have put any chemicals on the wall too, so.
I also wanted to ask about the mop boards. Doesn't Grandma's...
I asked her about the
I
mop
want to ask
boards.
you about that.
Yes.
This book says you have decorated mop boards.
Yeah, it was all painted when we moved into the house. It was all, I
Okay.
don't remember, you know, the rooms that were stenciled, and that was it.
Yeah. What she's talking about is in Randy Bennett's book. He describes the mop boards as being marbleized. So I think the term marbleized is probably misused there. To me, it would be absolutely unbelievable if they were truly marbleized. I'll bet that they were grained, full grained. Yeah.
It is possible to do that. I come from northern New York, and there's a little stone church in the village nearby. And everything came, the stones for the church, everything in the interior came from that area. The pillars in the church were maple trees from my grandfather's woods, but they were marbleized, and they did. You know, if you didn't know that much and had never seen real marble, you'd go in that church and wow, marble pillars.
Yeah, yeah. I've done marbleizing, and simply what it means is painting a piece of wood to look like marble. Well, why would you do that on baseboards in Otisfield, Maine? However, woodwork was frequently grained. The Norman and Margelia Hamlin's house in Spurs Corner, which is now owned by the Schofields, that has graining. Not throughout the whole house, but there's a front room that all of the woodwork in that front room is grained. The doors are made to look like flame mahogany, and it's all cheap wood that's been grained. And I'm sure there's many houses in Otisfield.
I always had great,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
have those tools that were my grandfather's.
Yes, Callie's got a wonderful set of graining tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my bet is, he used the term marbleized, but what he should have said was grained. But anyway, they're painted over, so.
Any sense of, how prevalent this either painting or wall muraling was in this area or in Maine in general? Or is it just, it seems to, it comes up very frequently around in this area.
Yeah, the heyday would be 1790 to 1840, and it was really popular because decorated wallpaper was so popular. There were evidently dozens of these itinerant stencilers who traveled. Not only New England, they went to Pennsylvania and Ohio and so forth as well. Different artists in different areas. The folk art style is really prevalent here in New England. In Janet Waring's book, which again, that's published in 1937, so we're talking about, what, 2 generations ago really, she talks about visiting dozens of houses. And she talks about visiting houses that are tumbled down and there's just one wall still standing with its stenciling there. And I can't imagine that any of those ruins are still around. So I think there really were a lot of houses. The house that I grew up in was 1804 Federal in Stowe, Maine, Stowe without an E, just north of Freiburg. And all the wallpaper came off in there, and there was no evidence evidence of stenciling in that house, but there are plenty of houses, old houses in Freiburg that had it, so.
I've got it in my barn, my house was built 1820, and in the back workroom, there's a stencil on the wall. I'm gonna have to look, because I remember seeing it, well, that's an odd place, but I wonder if they were trying something out. It's probably about, just one stencil, all black, on the wall, chunk.
And it's not, it also is not that unusual for them to have put a single stencil in a barn. Waring talks about that in her book.
Did it have meaning? I'll have to take it.
I'll
I'll take a picture of it and email it to you if you want, because now I want to know.
Okay, if there are no other questions,
Thank you very much.